Guys, with plenty to talk about with UFC 262 in the books, our next guest joining us to break down the action is the Dennis Rodman of the MMA world. Dana White would describe this man as a bad boy, and for good reason. The head of Severe MMA and the SWO, Hollywood, Sean Sheehan. Welcome back to Submission Radio, brother.
Hello, it's my demands have finally been met. I'm back. It's here at 6:30 in the morning Irish time. That's the only time I would come on after those are my demands. I'm choosing this myself to come on at this time, so I'm happy to be on. I'm delighted that I've had G back on basically on my podcast, and I'm looking forward to getting into this here.
It kind of is your podcast. Sean Sheehan, the Are You Up at 2 a.m. of MMA. That's the only way we communicate with Sean. You up, and then and Sean always
inevitably
is.
Yes.
The only man who's up at like 6:30 right now, Ireland time. What a trooper. But let's get into it, man. UFC 262. Holy Santa Claus shit. What a main event. Michael Chandler putting it on Charles Oliveira in the first round, seemingly having him hurt. A lot of people thinking, hey, this could be another quick first round finish for Michael Chandler. And then Oliveira stunning people by silencing the critics. Obviously, the criticism of him has been that he kind of welts, he kind of crumbles under the pressure. It looks like it was going to happen all over again. And then he came out in the second round and just finished Michael Chandler like that. Stunning win for him. What did you make of the way that it played out, Sean?
Like, I thought it was very, very shocking, to be honest, because I was expecting Oliveira to win. And like maybe win by knockout. I was expecting him to win by submission. And look, I expected the fight to kind of play out the way it did at the start, where there was a lot of back and forth and a lot of big shots landed. But I didn't expect the fight to kind of go to the ground the way it was, Oliveira to get the back, for that, the fight not to end there, then for Chandler to get on top, land some big shots. He had already cut Oliveira, and kind of the last 2 minutes of the round, or from the second last minute to the last minute, land a lot of big shots there and look like Oliveira was in trouble. Once that had happened, I didn't expect Oliveira to win the fight from there. Now, I went back and watched that first round again, and it wasn't as bad as it is live. It always seems worse live. But while watching it live, I can't lie, I was like, oh, my pick is wrong. I think Chandler is going to win this. I think he's going to go on and win it. But then the way Oliveira came out in that second round and just put it on Chandler, like, I was kind of expecting the first round to start the way the second round started, not so much to get a knockout, but to land some big shots early. And Charles Oliveira is maybe a little bit hesitant, but he came out and he did the job in the second round, and it was unbelievable. Like, I think the first round was just because of the last minute of the round, not really much happened. But those first 4 minutes of the round, there was lots of stuff back and forth. You thought the fight was going to end a few times throughout it. Has to be one of the rounds of the year, I think, just for the first 4 minutes of it. It was really, really great. And it was a fun night of fights all around, I think. But the main event was really, really fun. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, a lot of fans sort of looking at Chandler and criticizing some of the options that he made in that first round. I just want to get your thoughts on it, Sean. A lot of people thinking, hey, why are you going down there with Oliveira? Let him stand back up. Work from the striking. You're having so much success. Do you think he sort of made some fight IQ mistakes in that first round, from your opinion?
The problem with that is, right, if you go to the ground with Charles Oliveira, you can't just stand back up, because if you move one way, Charles Oliveira is going to pull you, that way, get your leg, get an arm, get a triangle or something like that. So you have to be very careful when you're on the ground with Charles Oliveira. I went back this week on Patreon and watched the Kevin Lee fight with Oliveira. And if you watch that fight, you'll see the reason why Michael Chandler was maybe a little bit safe, because every way Kevin Lee moved, Oliveira was just winning the fight in that way, and his jiu-jitsu was exceptional. And the only way Kevin Lee kind of was able to win that fight was be very, very heavy on top in half guard. And you saw what Michael Chandler was basically the same. He was very, very heavy on top for maybe 45 seconds. Until Charles Oliveira kind of was the one trying to get out, and then Chandler was able to give himself a bit of time. But I wouldn't criticize Chandler too much for that. You can't put yourself into danger against someone who's such a real finisher like Charles Oliveira. Like, you really can't. Like, Oliveira was the one who initiated the grappling at first, so Chandler can't be blamed for that. Okay, he went for the guillotine, but the guillotine was there. You go for the guillotine if you can. He got his back taken, which was the big issue. But he got out of that, and he managed to get on top of Charles Oliveira, and he managed to not get submitted. So, just because he got finished in the first 30 seconds or whatever it was of or first 19 seconds of the second round, it's easy like to look back at hindsight 2020, but I think he did the right thing. You have to survive in situations like that with someone as good as Charles Oliveira on the ground. He won the round. So look, as I said, easy to look back on that, but I couldn't criticize him for that. I don't think he'll look back and think about it either. I think he did the right thing at the time.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it was just such a big moment. You could see Charles Oliveira. He was just so cool going out into that octagon. You know, he's a real veteran. He's been in there. It took him, 28 fights to get to this moment. Michael Chandler, though, you could see he wasn't nervous or anything, but you could see he was feeling that moment. He was out there and he was really trying to push the action, really trying to get things done. If you look at it from his perspective, would you have done anything different from Michael Chandler's sort of side of things? Would you pace yourself more? Would you have done something else? Or is it just a case where Charles Oliveira was just too good, too cool, and just got that right time, right moment in the second round?
Well, I'll tell you what my analysis was coming into the fight, right? And you can throw it out if maybe people don't agree with it or whatever. My analysis coming into this fight was the best way for Michael Chandler to win this fight was to go out and try to land big left hooks and big right hooks early. And that's exactly what he did. You know, he did exactly, I think, what he needed to do. And it almost worked. It really did. It almost worked. I think when you're fighting someone like Charles Oliveira, his new striking acumen is just so good. And the way he uses his striking and is really wild with it and can throw as hard as he wants because he's not afraid to go to the ground. You know, if you take him down, it benefits him. So it doesn't really matter for him. And I think the only way to win that is to meet fire with, or to win against that, is to kind of meet fire with fire, and attack his attacks and land those big shots. And Michael Chandler did that very well in the start. If you play that game, like, I think it's a brave game. That's the kind of go out in your shield game, game to play. You either go, and I think that's what Michael Chandler did. He was either going to win or lose early, and that's what happened. He ended up losing early. He almost won early. So, no, I think he actually fought a game plan which I think he'll look back on and think, right, I fought the right game plan. I tried my best. I tried to win. It didn't work for me on the night. But, I wasn't actually expecting Chandler to do as well or to have as much success as he did. Like, maybe if the fight had been on the feet for a little bit more of the first round, he could have got the finish because he was landing lots of shots and he was doing very well. And he was managing to push Charles Oliveira back, something I didn't think he'd actually be able to do. But Charles Oliveira did get the fight to the ground and did manage to keep it on the ground. He was kind of holding Chandler in a lot as well and keeping it there. So credit to Oliveira for just doing that and surviving in those positions and keeping it in those positions. But yeah, I think Chandler, with the opportunities that he got, he absolutely went out there and did his best to take them. But just unfortunately for him, it wasn't enough in the end.
Man, I remember years ago when we were doing this show and we were doing like a post-fight and Oliveira was like somewhere on the prelims or the undercard. And I think he got a win, but I remember saying like, and this is him at featherweight. And I was saying like, he really needs to improve his wrestling. He's got great jiu-jitsu, but he needs to improve his wrestling if he ever wants to be a threat at featherweight and take down a guy like Jose Aldo, who was champion at the time. And it was just almost unfathomable to picture him a champion in the weight class above and to be so much more improved. And here he is now, champion in one of the toughest divisions in the UFC, in the crowd. It was such a, like, his positivity, his happiness was contagious when he was in the crowd tonight. So a really, really like feel-good moment in MMA. But not to do the typical MMA thing and just move straight forward past the moment. But man, you got to think he's going to be facing the winner of McGregor and Poirier. How do you think Oliveira does? And do you think with his skill set, his newly improved skill set, he can potentially be a long-term champion? Or do you think it's going to be a bit of a hot potato situation with him as champion?
At lightweight, it's going to be very hard to be a long-term champion unless you're Khabib. There's just so many good guys there. The thing about it is, right, so my analysis coming into this fight is, how would you beat Charles Oliveira? You land big power shots. If he's fighting Conor McGregor, if he's fighting Dustin Poirier, there's two lads who like to land big power shots.
And Gaethje.
So it's going to, and yeah, Gaethje or even Dariush, we saw tonight. Sure, you'll get to that as well. But like, there's lots of guys, lots of hitters, as Nick Diaz would say, in that lightweight division. So there's lots of fun fights coming up. That's the thing about Oliveira as well, is he has kind of one game plan, and that's go out and go balls to the wall with his striking and get the fight to the ground and try to submit someone. He's a finisher, and that's what he wants to do throughout all his fights. So I think whoever he fights, it's going to be fun because the MO when you're fighting Charles Oliveira is to go in and finish him, and his MMO is to go in and get the finish as well. So, like this lightweight division, for what it was getting a little bit boring with Khabib, or maybe not boring when Khabib was fighting, or like the build up to the fight, because we kind of convinced ourselves lads had chances against him. But then after fights, we're like, no one can beat him, you know. But now we have, like, it's just new and it's fun and it's these guys are so good. I'm really looking forward to it. Whoever it is, I'd love to see him fight McGregor. I'd love to see him fight Poirier. So yeah, I think it'll be one of them. I think Justin Gaethje has another little bit to do, but I wouldn't mind. Look, I saw a few people talking about Gaethje versus Dariush. That's not a bad fight. I wouldn't mind seeing that. I think the problem is Dariush has probably done enough as well now at this stage to get a title shot, but we know he's probably not going to get it because it's going to be either McGregor or Poirier, and that fight's coming up in less than 2 months' time. So I think Oliveira would be happy enough to wait out to get the winner of that, and I'm sure, especially if it's McGregor, he'll want a quick turnaround. I'm sure Poirier too would like to fight before the end of the year. So you know, with Khabib as well, the issue was he didn't fight that much. Whether you love him or hate him, he didn't fight that much. And I think the lads who are there at the moment will want to fight. You know, McGregor hasn't always fought lots, but I think he's in a mood now where he wants to fight. And if the UFC kind of allow him to do that with the fans back now, I think he will, especially if he wins. So, yeah, interesting times at lightweight.
So you actually think McGregor's going to want to fight Oliveira? For some reason, I get this feeling of like, you know, Oliveira is such a tough fight. He's not really the biggest name, not really a guy that McGregor might make as much money through pay-per-view with. And it kind of feels like once he gets done with Dustin, he's back on this win streak. Maybe he starts picking some of these fights together to keep this win streak going. Or do you think he legitimately is like, nah, I'm going to go for this title even against a guy like Charles Oliveira?
I don't think there's really anyone else there. Like, there isn't any huge fights there from McGregor. Like, if Khabib was still there, or if GSP was still there, maybe one of them. But like, who else? Like, McGregor is the draw. He is the big fight. Okay, he could fight Nate Diaz, but that Nate Diaz fight's there all the time. Like, if he loses to Poirier, then he fights Nate Diaz. I think it makes sense. Or he fights Masvidal, one of those fights. But I don't think those fights are going to be a blowaway if he wins it. I think if he wins against Poirier, I think he'll be happy enough to fight Oliveira. If he beats Poirier, people will be back on the McGregor bandwagon, and they'll be back on, can he win, you know, the title bandwagon, and we'll get into that again. Like, I think McGregor as well, especially after he sold in, you know, some of the whiskey, he's made a lot of money. I actually think for a first time in maybe a long time that money isn't as much of a motivator with him in the fighting realm of it as it once was. You know, he made the big money from Floyd. He made the big money from Khabib. You know, he's set now, and I'm sure he'll want to make lots of money. He's not going to fight for nothing, but I think he kind of wants to prove something to himself now. Whether he can prove it, I'm not so sure. I'd be skeptical enough about that. I wait for another few weeks to give my pick on that fight, and we'll see how he gets on in preparation and all. But I feel like he does want to prove something to someone. You know, he's talking about getting away and, you know, kind of leaving the family to go into isolation to train like he did years and years ago for his UFC debut. And that's, if you're like a Conor McGregor fan, I think that's probably, you know, a manna from heaven for you. So we'll see if it works out. But yeah, I do. I'd be a little bit less skeptical, I think, in most people in that. And before I would have been ultra skeptical because I was always the one who thought the GSP fight had happened and all that, and that didn't. But the Floyd fights happened and all of them. But yeah, at the moment, I think if he does beat Poirier, which is easier said than done, I think he will fight Charles Oliveira then.
God, what an interesting matchup that would be and possibly will be. But just before we move on, what do you do with Chandler? I know, you know, Gaethje could be another possibility for him just because Gaethje's coming off a loss, Chandler's coming off a loss. By the way, it would have been just insane if Chandler had won the belt in just 2 fights. UFC debut and then the next fight winning the belt. But unfortunately, it was not to be. So for him to rebound, who do you think makes sense for him in the division?
It's an interesting one. So he fought Hooker in his first fight and fought Charles Oliveira. The thing about it is, because he came over from Bellator, there's so many options. Like, you could match him against Tony Ferguson. Dos Anjos is coming up again. He's looking for a big fight. You know, even, you know, you mentioned Gaethje. Even Dariush, I think, would be a big fight for him. So I think RDA maybe. I like that fight. I think RDA is looking for someone above him, and I think he'll kind of wait until he gets someone like that. I don't know if he's matched yet or not, but yeah, Yeah, I like that fight. But I think the thing is, at lightweight, sometimes recently, especially, one person loses a title fight, and then we kind of put them straight back into the picture again. And I don't know, is that the best thing to be doing at the moment? Like, what happened to kind of earning your way back or winning a couple of fights and getting back? And at lightweight, where there's so many good fighters, where there's so many killers, you think, you think it'd be an extra couple of steps. Like Gaethje just talks about Gaethje getting right into the title picture again. I don't think he's there yet. I think Gaethje needs to win a couple of fights. And I think Chandler now, unfortunately for him, look, he got his, well, not unfortunately, because he beat Dan Hooker, who's a good fighter, and but not the best fighter in the world, and not one who you think, oh, you beat Dan Hooker, you deserve a title shot, and no disrespect to Dan Hooker or anything. So he got a title shot off of a win that would normally get you on, and he got the title. So, get a couple more wins, get back in there and get back up to the top. And if that's RDA and then maybe Dariush or then Gaethje or something maybe instead of Dariush, I think that's the way to go. And let's get these guys fighting, because lightweight for the last while there hasn't been lots of fights, and that tends to happen when like Khabib doesn't fight that much. There's guys probably trying to time it and seeing when they can come back and seeing when they can be in line to fight Khabib. So I think that's kind of gone out the window now a little bit. So hopefully we see a few more fights and we get a few of these lads mashed up.
Yeah, it might be interesting to see if Poirier does lose against McGregor, maybe a Poirier-Chandler fight as well. That could be a fun fight there as well. So lots of fun options. Before we jump to Tony, Sean, I mean, it's already starting. People are starting to, what would a Charles Oliveira Khabib fight look like? What would that look like? He's the new champ now. Do you think it ever gets to a point where Oliveira is able to get enough defenses under his belt that it actually becomes a big discussion amongst people, something that everybody starts debating? And do you think it could get strong enough and big enough that Khabib himself would be interested enough to come back into that octagon one more time?
Maybe. Khabib will fight again. That's a fact. He will
you
fight
think?
again. No
really?
Retire. Absolute.
I don't believe it.
No. Yeah, never been retirement being real. Come on, let's be honest here. Khabib will fight. I think the best way to get Khabib back, or the quickest way to get Khabib back, is if McGregor wins his next two fights, and then Khabib will be back quicker than anything, without a shadow of a doubt. The weird thing was, I was actually thinking about it just as the two lads were walking out. Khabib kind of retired, and he had the whole thing. Obviously, his father passed away, and his mother and everything. But the whole thing about it was like he's beaten all the competition, and there's nothing left. The two lads fighting tonight, he hadn't beaten either of them, so that was a bit weird. That there's the one title fight after Khabib, he hadn't fought either of the guys. So, I would like to see the matchup between Oliveira and Khabib. Look, Khabib would probably win again. We probably all know that. But the way Oliveira fights, I think it's a really, really fun matchup against Khabib, and his jiu-jitsu is so good that he has a chance. Like, everyone used to say Tony has a chance with his jiu-jitsu. I never bought into that. I always thought Khabib would dominate that fight. And as we've seen the last couple of fights, I think a lot of people may have... look, Tony's a little bit past it now at this stage, I suppose, but I think he's looked past it by guys who are very, very good. But I think Oliveira is a little bit of a different kettle of fish, and his striking is very, very good as well, and he hits harder than Tony, I think. So that'd be a very, very fun fight between him and Khabib. I don't think he is the name, or he is the draw, or he is the amount of money that's going to draw Khabib out of it. Mm-hmm. And look, competition. Khabib always said about competition. If Khabib wanted competition, if he wanted the real hardest fights, he'd go up and fight Usman. He just would. And if he wanted that, that's the fight he would make. Khabib's always struggled to get down to 155. He's a big guy at that weight. He could fight at 170. But, I know they have the same manager and everything like that as well. But, he's the same manager as Justin Gaethje as well, and they fought. So that didn't make a difference then. Why does it make a difference now? Khabib will be back. It depends who it will be. Maybe it'll be welterweight. Maybe it'll be Charles Oliveira if he can get 2 or 3 title fights under his belt, or maybe it'll be McGregor if he can get the title back. But yeah, he will be back.
I hope you're right, Mystic Sean. I can't help but be so skeptical. I don't see Khabib coming back. I feel like if he was going to that he was going to already do it, that we would have already seen it, or something more concrete than just these GSP talks for the last 6,000 years. And I just get the sense that Oliveira is just another guy. I don't know. But what I'm really fascinated by is your take that he would come back quickly and willingly to fight McGregor, because I just got this sense always that that chapter of his life is done, and he doesn't want to do Conor the favor of giving him any chance at a redemption.
Yeah, but okay, with the first things first, the thing about Khabib is Khabib, fought once a year anyway. So even if he was still the champion, he probably wouldn't have been back yet anyway. So that's one thing. And the other thing is my thought about McGregor. Imagine if McGregor's there holding the belt. Right, McGregor's there and he has his UFC lightweight belt over his shoulder, and he's saying, "Come on, Khabib, come get it!" Come on, that writes itself. There's Khabib has great self-restraint and everything, but if Conor McGregor's holding that belt that he let go, it takes and look at imagine the amount of money, because there's lots of steps to go before that happens. But imagine if that does happen, McGregor would have beaten Poirier, he'd have beaten Charles Oliveira, and he'd be back at the top of the mountain. Everyone will be believing him again. The fans will be back in the stadium. All the Irish fans will be there. He'll be cocky as ever, calling out Khabib, saying he's the best, saying, "Come on, come back and prove it." It'll happen. It'll absolutely happen if we get to that stage. Now, if we don't get to that stage, it might take something else. It might be a little bit further down the line, but I just think it'll be too much.
You sold it well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I mean, narrative is a big part of the puzzle in MMA, and if Conor McGregor is able to achieve that, that would be a pretty significant thing. And fans are going to start talking about it. Oh, Khabib doesn't want to come back. Oh, how it all switches around. And if there's any chance that McGregor ever moves up to welterweight and is able to make some moves there, who knows, maybe that motivates Khabib even more. But let's quickly talk about Tony, the man that was supposed to fight Khabib and never got a chance to. We saw him back in there, and man, he was so over. Speaking of Hulk Hogan, this was like Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania 3. The fans were chanting. Everyone was going wild. But unfortunately, Tony had another bad day at the office against Beneil Dariush. Possibly, one of the most sort of insignificant performances that he's had thus far. Not really able to do anything and looking not the Tony of old, just like he has in the last few fights. What was your reaction to Beneil's approach to this fight? Tony not tap into that crazy heel hook, and the fact that I suppose it was another bad night at the office for Tony, where fans are wondering maybe this should be it. Yeah,
I was thinking coming into the fight whether Tony would look a little bit better in this fight. Or whether, sometimes you see a couple of fights and you see a couple of bad performances and you don't know whether, and especially in this time with, people being locked down with COVID, might not be able to get their coaches and everything like that. So I gave him the benefit of the doubt. I thought he might come in and look a little bit better, but I don't think he did really. Now, taking that away from Beneil Dariush, I'm a big Beneil Dariush fan. He's on Team Sheehan and has been for a good while. Honestly, I think he is one of the most talented fighters in that division and has been for years. His jiu-jitsu is fantastic. His wrestling is fantastic. His striking is fantastic. His biggest issue has been his chin, but that seems to be something that he has solved now. So he's just a little bit like Oliveira. A lot of people, I think, doubted him, but now he's kind of turned around and has become the fighter that, people who believed in him thought he could be. And his approach tonight, I thought it might be a little bit more of a striking approach, but I think when he did come in and land those big shots early, he landed a big left hand over the top. I don't think Tony liked that, and I think he kind of not that he initiated the clinch and the takedown, but I think he got a little bit closer and kind of gave up the opportunities to be taken down. And once he did that, and once Dariush kind of got on top and used his wrestling, was landing some ground upon, I think he was happy enough to do that. And I think it was Rogan or DC said it on the commentary that he's kind of getting flashbacks to the last fight where Oliveira was on top of him and just dominating him. And from that point on, I think it was just, the fight was kind of just over. When he almost got that heel hook in his knee, and then he came out for the round and he could barely walk. And you knew that Dariush was just going to go and kind of throw him down, and got a big slam and took him down again. It was just over. Dariush fought a smart fight. A part of me thought a bit through the fight. Like Tony Ferguson's only been finished once in the last 12 years by Justin Gaethje. It'd be kind of good. It'd look good, especially for you with what's coming up in the lightweight division and with what is above you to get a finish. You know, even to submit Tony Ferguson, that'd mean a lot. So if you want to, if you're marking him as the best fighter in the best weight division in the world, which he is trying to be, absolutely, I think you can be critical there. And I would be a little bit, but still, you know, you're still fighting Tony Ferguson. You still went in, you dominated, you won 32-7, so you can't be too critical. I think with Tony, look, Tony's a little bit past his prime. Was Tony ever the best lightweight in the world? Absolutely not. You know, was he top 5? Yeah. Was he top 2 or 3? No, I don't. Borderline, maybe the 3rd, but I don't think he was. I think he was always a little bit underrated. And I think the fact that he never met Khabib was kind of a godsend for Tony a little bit. And like I said this at the time, and especially Graham, who does the podcast with me, he always maintained this. He always said that Tony Ferguson was the most overrated fighter in the UFC way before all these losses, even when he's won 12 in a row or whatever. And like, when you say overrated, like it's a weird thing because overrated doesn't necessarily mean bad. Tony Ferguson is a very, very good fighter, but when people are saying he's the guy, he's the kryptonite for Khabib, he was never that. Tony Ferguson was never that. He was always a very good top 5 fighter, but he was never the best in the world. And I think he's kind of past his peak now as well, and he's kind of slipping from top 5 to top 10 to top 15, and we know how MMA goes. Will go further as the years go on.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of slips, don't slip while you're shaving your balls and leave your balls looking like a bloody mess like they just won fight of the night. Use the Manscaped Lawnmower 3.0 with its skin-safe technology, and it will never cut your balls or any part of your body. Man, these guys, the engineers, spent over 18 months perfecting this tool, crafting it so that it doesn't cut you. You think Elon Musk, you think Tesla are doing research? Check out the R&D department at Manscaped. You would think it was Wayne Enterprises, the way they care for your balls, and you want to make sure they're smooth with the Lawnmower 3.0. You want to whip out those bad boys at the end of a hot date. You don't want the date going, is that the winner of fight of the night? You want the date going, my God, they're so smooth. You must use the Manscaped Lawnmower 3.0, and they have a lot of other great products, the Manscaped Cologne, and all sorts of other things that keep you fresh and smelling nice, and they're giving away a 20% discount with the code SUBMISSION, so make sure you use the code SUBMISSION, get you 20% off. Who doesn't love saving money? And who doesn't love having smooth balls minus the cuts on your nuts? Isn't that right, Dennis?
That's right, man. And once you're done taking care of downstairs, why not jump into Surfshark and get yourself sorted for some content? Guys can watch fights from all over the world, things like the PFL 1 boxing and other companies that put on some huge fights right now that are hard to be watched and accessed here in Australia. What about the NFL, NBA, the Cornhole Championships? All your favorite shows and movies on places like HBO Max that can't be watched in Australia and New Zealand, or old episodes of discontinued shows that need to be binged today, like Bully Beatdown. I mean, what an adventure that is, Cass. If you haven't watched Bully Beatdown, have you really ever lived? 30 days, money back guarantee. So don't hesitate to try it now. You guys have a crazy, crazy deal. If you go to surfshark.deals/submission and enter promo code submission, you get an 83% discount and 3 extra months for free. With a deal like that, jump on right now and use that code word submission. And Cass, I know that you got that little wallet there. That's just been absolutely handy everywhere we go. That is the Ridge wallet. Friends at Ridge putting out these crazy wallets. That wallet right there holds up to 12 cards. There's room for cash, so many different colors, 40,000 5-star reviews. And it's so durable that each wallet comes with a lifetime warranty. So jump on right now, get 10% off today and free worldwide shipping by going to ridge.com/submission and using code word submission now. But Sean, going back to Tony, is it a case also where, maybe it's not as much that he's past it as it is that the competition is sort of at a different level, the skill set is at a different level, and the stuff that Tony Ferguson used to do, which was super effective, is now has gaps in it, and he hasn't sort of evolved with what everybody else has been doing?
A little bit of both, I think. Like when you meet someone like Justin Gaethje and your approach is to go balls to the wall and go forward, well, you're just going to get picked apart, and you're just going to get taken down. And when you meet someone like Charles Oliveira, who is a better jiu-jitsu artist than you and has a similar style but hits harder and is more effective in that style than you ever were, that's going to be a big problem. And you meet someone like Beneil Dariush, who is better jiu-jitsu than you as well, who hits harder than you, and you don't really have the confidence you once had, and he's, to kind of test his chin the way you might have been able to do it before, that's bad as well. So yeah, I think he's met very good fighters. Like the last 3 guys who have beaten him have all been very, very good. Like you take a beating like the one he took against Justin Gaethje as well, and Oliveira, and at this stage of your career, it's very hard to recover from that. So it's definitely a bit of both. Like if Tony Ferguson went in his last 3 fights against fighters not as good as them, he probably would have won all 3 of them. So there definitely is that point. But like, I think sometimes we try to deny where fighters are in their career. Frank Yeager, we always talk about. I don't want to go and rant about Frank Yeager again as well. But like,
here we go.
No, but I came on here not too long ago. Yeah, but think about it. I came in here not too long ago and said like Frank Yeager has got to a position where like he should retire and he needs, he's done enough in his career. He's gone down. And what happens? Frank Yeager gets absolutely sparked in one of his fights. That's what happens. And like, where are all those people now giving out to me? Like when that happened, like that's the thing that happens. I'm like, I'd love if this was Tony Ferguson's last fight. I'd love if he like, he's done it all. It's not going to get any better for him. And look, the issue is, I suppose, money and everything like that as well. And there's a lot, and it's easy for me to say it like, yeah, I don't think it's going to get any better for Tony Ferguson, unfortunately for him. And maybe he thinks, or maybe a lot of people think, he didn't get to the apex of where he could have gotten to, but I think he did, to be honest. So I don't think he should have too many regrets.
Yeah, and I think if you ask Tony that, he wouldn't believe that he got to the top. He always believed that he could be a champion. It's kind of sad, like, that he had such a massive streak and he never got to fight for the real belt. Like, that's just such a kind of sad story in MMA. And now you see him with, an injured knee, and I don't know. MMA is a very fun sport to watch. It's also an extremely cruel sport that leaves the participants sometimes with nothing or not as much to show for as they want. I think of, like, the Dark Knight Rises, where Batman's in that prison and there's that hole up top, and they talk about hope is what cripples people because everyone thinks they can get out of the prison, but it's like no one's getting out of that prison. Well, unless you're Batman. So I guess Khabib would be the Batman. Yeah, exactly right. So I feel like with Tony, because he didn't get that Khabib fight, he was always like, I will get that title somehow, some way, like, if not through Khabib, then someone else. And it just showed that, well, that didn't happen at all. And it's actually just getting worse and worse and worse for him. And he's such a fan favorite fighter. Dennis mentioned the pop. So it's sad to see that. DC pointed it out well, Matt. It is a new era. It's a new generation. Some of our favorites that we've kind of grown up with in the sport are just reaching that point where they're on the decline. Do you think the UFC cut him, or do you think he's such a fan favorite that they give him at least one more? And I only say that, definitely don't want to see Tony cut, but some of the cuts are somewhat surprising, guys that you've kind of grown up with for a while.
Yeah, I think they'll probably give him one more. But, it was funny tonight. On the undercard fights, they were like, Dana White Contender Series alum versus Dana White Contender Series alum, and I was like, I was wondering why I'd never heard of either of those guys, Like, that's what's happening. The likes of Tony Ferguson, Junior Dos Santos, Verdum, all of these people, their place on the card is being taken by Dana White Contender Series alums. And that's not to say they're all bad. We'll have Dan Ige came through there, and Sean O'Malley, and some very good, Kevin Holland and some very good fighters come through there. But like, a lot of them won't be either. And look, it's the way the UFC are going. They want to pay badly. They want to, sell the name. They want to sell those 3 letters as your dream. Even though other places pay better, and that that works, and that happens for a lot of people that will choose to go to the UFC over other places. And so you'll still get a lot of very, very good fighters in there. But the problem is a lot of them will go to Bellator, and then with the way fighters are coming through the Contender Series, when they're 3, 4, 5-0, or like 6-2 or something like that, and they don't have the experience of having, like, look at someone like a Yuri Prochazka, who's had 30 fights outside the UFC or whatever, and he comes in and he's ready for a title. McGregor back in the day, he'd 15, 16 fights outside of the UFC. He came in, he was 2 or 3 fights, and he was ready for a title. We're not seeing that as much anymore. And I think and this is, I suppose, a whole different debate, not the question you asked me at all. But anyway, I think the development of MMA has actually been hurt and hindered by the Dana White Contender Series. And I suppose the reason for that is because they're trying to get rid of guys like Ferguson who, have reached their top, I suppose, and are the other side of it for cheaper options. But there could be a way to match Tony Ferguson where you can still have him in big fights and have him in winnable fights and have he could go up to welterweight and fight someone like Robbie Lawler. Or you could have him fight Nick Diaz or Nate Diaz. There are lots of fun fights there for Tony Ferguson that are very winnable. Yeah, I would hope they'd match him that way. But the UFC matchmaking recently has not been great in all realms. So I'd have no confidence in that, to be honest.
Yeah, because by the time these guys get over and become fan favorites, most of these guys are at the end of their career, right? So on this card, for example, Tony Ferguson was by far the biggest draw on the card and probably a reason why people bought the pay-per-view. So there could be sort of some thinking in the future for these matchmakers that, hey, maybe we can get a little bit more out of these guys towards the end of their career, match them up with other veterans and put on a fun fight on the pay-per-view that draws people to watch these new guys coming up from the Contender Series and sort of do it like that. And a lot of these guys may have a more graceful exit out of the sport. But as I say that, Tito Ortiz just tweeted out Chuck Liddell would need to run it back in the UFC. So that's definitely not what I'm talking about right there. Of course, guys, you can follow Sean Sheehan on Twitter at Sean Sheehan BA, Severe MMA Pod at Severe MMA Pod, one of the greatest shows going around. Good luck with the SWO, man. It's the greatest thing going today. Do you like it or not?
Wait, I'm lost. Well, it's 7:11 in the morning.
Sean World Order for life.
For life. World Order. Okay, yeah. Okay. What was the sign they made? I don't know. What was the sign? Did they do this? What did they do? Well, I don't know.
It's the wolf, man. It's the wolf. It's the yeah. That's DX, Sean. You're just embarrassing yourself now.
Oh yeah, here we go.
Yeah,
is that it?
That's it. That's the one. Yeah.
It's just too sweet, Sean Sheehan. Thank you so much.
Someone gift that. Someone gift it. Come on. Someone make a gift out of that. Beautiful.
Just too sweet. See you later, Sean. Thank you so much for joining us. Can't wait to see what happens next.
Thanks for having me, lads. God bless.